Welcome to Open Channels News with your host, Robert Jacoby. Today's news is brought to you by Automatic, InMotion Hosting, and Omnisend, three companies that get it and are passionate about what is going on in the open source ecosystem.
Good day. Welcome to OCN, the Open Channels News broadcast. Today is August 25th, 2026. Just double checking the date in the corner. I'm Robert Jacoby, your host. Shockingly, we lead today with AI because it's a day that ends in Y. Our first story. Linux Foundation wants a new open source license for AI. Our first story comes from Open Source for You. The Linux Foundation has submitted OpenMDW. Try to say that quickly. Open Model, Data, and Weights to the Open Source Initiative, OSI, for formal review as an open source license for artificial intelligence. And this gets to a problem we've been circling for a while. What exactly does open source mean when we're talking about AI? With traditional software, the answer is relatively straightforward. You have source code, you can look at it, modify, redistribute. License tells you what to do, what you're allowed to do. AI is messier. You have the code, you have the model architecture, you have the weights, you have the training data, and those are not the same thing. OpenMDW is an attempt to create a licensing framework specifically for that environment rather than trying to force traditional software licenses to do a job they weren't really designed to do. The license was developed by the Linux Foundation along with Amazon, Meta, IBM, and Microsoft. NVIDIA has also adopted it across several model families, including Cosmos, Isaac, Groot, Ising, and Nematron. Now, the open source initiative gets to decide whether OpenMDW actually qualifies as open source. Because if I give you the model weights, but don't tell you what data to train the model, is that open? If I give you the architecture, but not everything necessary to reproduce the model, is that open? We've spent decades getting reasonably comfortable with what open source software means. AI has taken that nice clean definition and thrown a bunch of weights, data sets, GPUs, all the madness into it. So this isn't just another software license. It's part of a much bigger debate over whether the principles of open source translate cleanly into AI at all. They probably, hopefully, maybe, kind of do, but the implementation is going to be a lot more complicated. And that story comes from Open Source for You. Next on our list, Debian debates AI-generated code. Our second story comes from the New Stack. And while the Linux Foundation is asking how AI itself should be licensed, Debian is asking what happens when AI starts contributing to open source. Debian developers are considering 8 different proposals governing the use of large language models and generative AI in contributions to the project. One proposal will prohibit direct Debian contributions written with the assistance of generative AI. Others would allow AI-assisted contributions with conditions, establish responsible use guidelines, or require humans to remain accountable for what gets submitted. That voting closes on August 28th. But this isn't really a debate about whether somebody used an AI tool to write some code. It's about trust. Open source has traditionally had a fairly simple model. You contribute the code, somebody reviews it, somebody takes responsibility for it. AI changes the scale of that equation. A developer can now generate 1,000 lines of perfectly reasonable-looking code in a few minutes. The question is whether that developer understands those 1,000 lines. Because if they don't, somebody else has to. The machine gets unlimited code generation. The maintainer gets unlimited homework. And given that with a lot of open source projects, it's volunteer time, that can be difficult. And it's not a particularly sustainable model. At the same time, banning AI-generated code doesn't necessarily eliminate AI-generated code. It may simply eliminate disclosure. So the better question may be, did AI write this? It may be, do you understand this code? Did you test it? Are you willing to put your name behind it? Whatever Debian decides, every major open source project is going to have to answer some version of that question. This story was reported by the New Stack. And last but not least, since I hope we haven't forgotten about these folks, Bitcoin. Bitcoin's next security problem may actually be open source. Our final story comes from the Cyber Management Alliance, and it starts with a simple security principle. If something is very difficult to attack, attackers usually find something easier. Bitcoin's core protocol has proven remarkably resilient. So rather than attacking Bitcoin itself, attackers increasingly target everything surrounding it. Wallets, exchanges, browser extensions, developer machines, cloud infrastructure, and of course, open source software dependencies. It's the software supply chain again. If the front door has a 12-inch steel lock, you don't spend 3 years designing a better drill, you check the windows. And that's really the point. The strongest piece of technology in the system doesn't necessarily determine how secure the entire system is. A compromised dependency can expose API keys, cloud credentials, wallet information, deployment secrets, and other sensitive information without anybody ever breaking Bitcoin itself. Suddenly, the developer laptop is part of the Bitcoin security perimeter. The defensive measures aren't particularly glamorous. Pin dependencies, scan packages, use software bill of materials, SBOMs, assign code, limit access, rotate credentials. Security, security, security. Because the strongest cryptography in the world doesn't help much if somebody gets your credentials from a package you downloaded yesterday. That's it. Nice and easy. 3 stories today, and they're really 3 layers of the same question. The Linux Foundation is asking what open means when the thing we're licensing isn't traditional software anymore, but models, weights, and training data. Debian is asking what trust means when some of the code entering an open source project may have been generated by a machine. And Bitcoin shows us what happens when all of that software becomes part of a much larger chain of dependencies. Definition, responsibility, security, that's the stack. Open source is always dependent on knowing where something came from, understanding what you can do with it, and trusting the people maintaining it. AI doesn't remove any of those requirements. If anything, makes them more important because we're creating more code, more models, and more dependencies faster than we ever have before. Being an open is the starting point. Knowing what you're actually opening is the next part. That's it for this edition of OCN, the Open Channel's news broadcast. I'm Robert Jacoby, your host. Until next time, be open and stay secure.